What if the real danger in Florida's 2026 immigration crackdown is not the raids you see on camera, but the quiet system working in the background every single day? One traffic stop, one job check, one missed document, one jail booking, and suddenly a normal day can turn into a life-changing nightmare. For thousands of families, the fear is no longer just about crossing a border. It is about getting trapped inside a system that keeps getting tighter, faster, and harder to escape. And the most shocking part? Many people may not even realize they are already standing in the danger zone. Across Florida, new enforcement partnerships, tougher workplace checks, and deeper cooperation with immigration authorities have created a climate of fear that feels impossible to ignore. This is not just about who entered illegally. It is also about who gets stopped, who gets questioned, who gets flagged, and who gets handed over next. That is why so many immigrants, workers, and mixed-status families are asking the same terrifying question. Who is really being targeted now? In this video, we will break down the 10 biggest reasons why many are calling this Florida's 2026 deportation trap. We will uncover how this system works, why it feels so dangerous, and who could be most at risk next. Stay with me, because what you are about to hear may completely change how you see Florida in 2026. Number 1. State and local police are being pulled deeper into immigration enforcement. For years, many people believed immigration enforcement was mostly a federal issue, something handled far away by agencies at the border or in major detention centers. But in Florida, that line is starting to feel much thinner. State and local police are being pulled deeper into the process, and that changes everything. Now the fear is no longer only about immigration raid. It is about everyday encounters, a traffic stop, a routine ID check, a minor violation, or a simple arrest that would once have ended locally. For many families, that creates a chilling new reality. The person stopping you may not be an immigration officer, but the system behind that stop can still push you toward immigration consequence. That is exactly why so many people are calling this the first layer of the trap. What makes this even more alarming is how normal these encounters can look at the beginning. A broken tail light, a missed signal, paperwork problem, a misunderstanding during a police interaction. These moments may seem small, but once someone enters the local system, the risk can grow fast. A local arrest can become a federal immigration issue in a matter of hours, and that is where fear turns into panic. People are not only worried about major crimes or high-profile cases, they are worried about ordinary situations that can suddenly spiral out of control. For undocumented immigrants, mixed-status families, and even legal residents connected to vulnerable relatives, this creates constant pressure in daily life. The deeper local police get involved, the more the entire atmosphere changes. Communities become quieter. People avoid reporting crimes. Witnesses stay silent. Families stop trusting the very systems that are supposed to protect them. When fear replaces trust, everyone becomes less safe. That is what makes this issue so powerful. It reaches far beyond one arrest or one person. It affects workers driving to jobs, parents taking children to school, and families trying to live normal lives without drawing attention. In simple terms, this is not just stronger enforcement. It is the expansion of fear into everyday life. And once that happens, the trap no longer begins at the border. It begins on the street. Number 2, a simple traffic stop can now carry much bigger consequences. For many people, a traffic stop feels like a short, stressful moment that ends with a warning, a fine, or maybe a ticket. But in Florida's growing enforcement climate, a simple stop on the road can become something much more serious. That is what makes this so frightening. It is not always dramatic in the beginning. There are no flashing headlines, no cameras, no major raid. It can start with something as ordinary as a turn signal, a broken light, expired paperwork, or confusion over identification. Yet once that stop turns into questioning, checking records, or a trip into the local system, the danger can rise fast. What looks small on the surface can suddenly open the door to life-changing consequences. This is why so many families are living with constant anxiety every time they get behind the wheel. The fear is not only about getting a citation, it is about what happens after the stop begins. If a person has no valid license, has inconsistent documents, cannot clearly prove status, or ends up detained even briefly, the situation can quickly become more serious than anyone expected. One roadside encounter can trigger a chain reaction. First comes the stop, then the questions, then the background check, and then the possibility of being pulled into a much larger system. For people already living in legal uncertainty, even a normal drive to work, school, church, or the grocery store can start to feel like a gamble. What makes this issue even more powerful is how deeply it affects daily behavior. People begin avoiding certain roads, driving less, skipping appointments, or depending on others for basic travel. Workers fear the commute. Parents fear school pickups. Families fear emergencies because even a rush drive to help someone can become a risk. That That is how enforcement moves from policy into personal life. It changes routines, creates silence, and makes ordinary movement feel dangerous. In a place where local enforcement is becoming more connected to immigration consequences, a traffic stop is no longer seen as just a traffic stop. For many, it feels like the moment where the trap can suddenly snap shut. Number 3, jail booking has become one of the most dangerous turning points. For many immigrants, the real danger does not begin with a major raid or a dramatic arrest shown on the news. It begins the moment someone is booked into a local jail. That is where a situation can suddenly change from a local problem into a much bigger immigration crisis. A person may think they are only dealing with a minor charge, a misunderstanding, a probation issue, or a simple legal problem that can be handled later. But once fingerprints are taken, records are checked, and information moves through the system, the risk can rise very fast. What feels like a temporary setback can suddenly become the doorway to detention, transfer, and possible removal proceeding. That is why jail booking is one of the most feared parts of the entire system. What makes this so intense is that many people do not realize how quickly local custody can connect to immigration consequences. One night in jail can become far more serious than the original issue that brought a person there. Even if the charge is minor, reduced later, or eventually dropped, the damage may already be done once the person enters that booking process. In many cases, the booking itself becomes the real trigger point. Families often think they still have time to solve the situation, post bond, call a lawyer, or explain what happened. But the system can move faster than they expect. And when that happens, panic sets in because the problem is no longer only local. It becomes something much harder, colder, and more difficult to stop. This is why communities see jail booking as one of the sharpest edges of Florida's enforcement climate. It turns small incidents into major fear. It makes people terrified of any contact with the criminal justice system, even for matters that once seemed manageable. The trap becomes most dangerous when ordinary mistakes lead into extraordinary consequences. A missed court date, a suspended license issue, a low-level arrest, or a misunderstanding can suddenly place someone in a pipeline they never saw coming. And once that pipeline starts moving, families often feel powerless watching it happen. That is what makes jail booking so alarming. It is not just a legal step, it is the moment where fear becomes real. Comment main leaky, warning agar apko lagda hai kalagan ko is bear main zayada jana chahi. Hum bohat menet ses videos banade hain, is Leah support kulia channel ko subscribe carrion, surf ek click. Number 4. Florida is not only relying on federal raids, it is building a state support system around them. One of the biggest reasons this issue feels so serious is because it is no longer only about federal agents showing up in sudden operations. Florida is building a wider support system around immigration enforcement, and that changes the entire picture. In the past, many people imagined deportation risk as something that appeared only during a major raid or a headline-making crackdown. But now the fear is deeper than that. It is about what happens when state structures, local agencies, detention systems, and political pressure all begin working in the same direction. That is when enforcement stops looking like isolated action and starts feeling like a machine. And for families already living with uncertainty, that machine feels much harder to avoid. What makes this especially alarming is that a support system does not need constant dramatic action to create fear. It works quietly in the background. It creates coordination, speeds up communication, strengthens transfers, and makes sure different parts of government are no longer acting separately. That means a person may not even realize how many layers are connected until it is too late. The risk is no longer only in the arrest itself, it is in the network waiting behind it. A local stop can feed into a county process. A county process can connect to detention. A detention decision can pull someone deeper into the federal system. Step by step, the pressure builds. And the most frightening part is how ordinary the beginning can look. This is why critics describe the situation as a trap instead of just a crackdown. A crackdown sounds sudden. A trap sounds designed. When the state begins helping create the path, the system becomes more predictable for enforcement and more dangerous for the people caught inside it. Families start feeling like every part of life is connected to the same threat. Driving, working, reporting problems, attending court, even dealing with basic paperwork. That kind of fear spreads fast because it does not stay limited to one agency or one incident. It becomes a climate. And once enforcement becomes supported from multiple directions, the danger no longer depends on one raid. It becomes part of the ground people are walking on every day. Number 5. Employer checks and job verification are turning the workplace into a danger zone. For many immigrants, the workplace used to feel like the one place where survival came before politics. If you worked hard, stayed quiet, and showed up every day, you could at least keep your life moving. But in Florida's tougher immigration climate, the job itself is becoming part of the trap. That is what makes this so unsettling. The fear is no longer only about police stops or jail booking. It is also about hiring forms, identity checks, payroll systems, and verification rules that can quietly expose someone long before any raid ever happens. A person may think they are simply going to work, but behind the scenes, their documents can become the first warning sign that puts them at risk. What makes this issue especially painful is how deeply it hits ordinary families. Work is not just a source of income. It is rent, groceries, medicine, school supplies, gas money, and the ability to survive another week. When employer checks become stricter, people do not just fear losing a job. They fear losing everything tied to that job. A mismatch in paperwork, a question about identity, or pressure on employers to verify more aggressively can push workers into panic very quickly. The workplace becomes more than a place of labor, it becomes a place of exposure. And once fear enters the job site, it spreads everywhere. Workers stay silent, avoid asking questions, accept worse conditions, and live under constant stress because one small issue can suddenly threaten their entire future. That is why this part of the system feels so powerful. It reaches people who may never have had police contact, never been arrested, and never appeared in a dramatic news story. It turns ordinary work life into a hidden enforcement zone. Construction crews, hotel staff, farm workers, cleaners, drivers, and subcontracted laborers all begin to feel the pressure in different ways. Some fear audits, some fear document reviews, some fear being replaced without warning. In simple terms, this is how the trap grows wider. It does not only target movement on the street, it targets survival at the source. And when people begin fearing the place that feeds their family, the emotional damage becomes even deeper than the legal threat itself. Number 6. Document checks are tightening, and daily life is becoming a minefield. One of the most frightening parts of Florida's immigration climate is that the pressure does not only appear during arrests, raids, or jail bookings. It can show up in the middle of ordinary life during moments that seem completely normal. A person may be trying to renew a license, apply for a permit, update records, sign paperwork, or prove identity for something routine. But when document checks become stricter, those simple tasks can suddenly feel dangerous. That is what makes this part of the system so chilling. It turns everyday paperwork into a source of fear. People begin worrying that one missing document, one expired card, one mismatch in spelling, or one question they cannot answer clearly could pull unwanted attention onto their lives. What used to feel like a boring office process can now feel like a doorway into something much bigger and much harder to control. This fear spreads fast because documents touch almost every part of modern life. You may need them to drive, work, rent, register, travel, or handle basic responsibility. When those checks become more aggressive, people stop seeing paperwork as routine and start seeing it as a risk. A document problem does not have to be huge to create huge consequences. Sometimes the issue is not fraud or crime at all. It may be confusion, delay, expired records, outdated information, or the simple reality that a person's status is complicated. But once officials begin looking closer, what started as a small administrative issue can become a major source of panic. Families feel this pressure deeply because one weak document can affect the whole household, not just one individual. That is why this part of the trap feels so powerful. It reaches into the quiet corners of life where people normally expect stability, punishes uncertainty, and immigration life is often full of uncertainty. People begin avoiding offices, delaying renewals, skipping applications, and living in fear of systems they cannot fully trust. In simple terms, document pressure makes daily life unstable. The trap no longer waits for a raid to find you. It can meet you at the counter, in the file, or in the form you thought was harmless. Number 7. Transportation laws are making even helping someone feel dangerous. One of the most disturbing parts of Florida's immigration crackdown is that the fear does not stop with the person being targeted directly. It can spread to the people around them too. That is what makes transportation such a powerful part of this story. In a normal world, giving someone a ride sounds simple. It sounds human. It sounds like something people do every day without thinking twice. A family member needs help. A friend needs to get to work. Someone needs a ride to a doctor, a church, or a safe place to stay. But when transportation becomes wrapped in immigration fear, even a simple act of helping can start to feel risky. That changes the emotional climate in a very deep way. because it teaches people not only to fear the law, but to fear compassion itself. What makes this so intense is the uncertainty. People do not always know where the legal line is, how a situation might be viewed, or whether helping someone travel could bring unwanted attention. That uncertainty is enough to create panic on its own. When people are afraid to drive relatives, afraid to help neighbors, and afraid to be seen offering support, communities begin to break apart from the inside. The damage is not only legal, it is social, emotional, and deeply personal. Families start making painful choices. Friends become cautious. Everyday kindness becomes something people second-guess. That is how fear becomes bigger than enforcement itself. This is why transportation laws feel like such a dangerous piece of the trap. They do not just control movement, they weaken trust between people. A system becomes even more powerful when it makes ordinary support feel dangerous. Once that happens, isolation grows. And when people become isolated, they become easier to pressure, easier to silence, and easier to push deeper into the shadow. That is the real power of this part of the crackdown. It does not only target where people go, it targets who feels safe helping them get there. Number 8. Florida's detention network makes the crackdown feel faster and more real. One reason this issue feels so terrifying is because enforcement does not end when someone is stopped, questioned, or booked into jail. There is already a larger detention system waiting in the background, and that changes how people experience the threat. For many families, fear becomes much more intense when they realize this is not just about being arrested for a moment. It is about being moved, processed, held, and pulled farther away from home. Once a person enters that pipeline, everything can start moving with a speed that feels brutal. The system no longer feels distant or theoretical. It feels physical, immediate, and real. That is what makes detention such a powerful part of the deportation trap. What makes detention especially frightening is the way it creates separation and confusion at the same time. A family may not know where their loved one has been taken, how long they will be held, or what happens next. Calls become urgent. Lawyers become expensive. Children become scared. Employers stop hearing from workers. Rent still has to be paid, but the person paying it may suddenly be gone. Detention does not only hold one person, it throws an entire family into crisis. And the longer that uncertainty lasts, the more crushing it becomes. Even before any final immigration decision is made, detention itself can already feel like punishment, pressure, and emotional collapse all at once. That is why this part of the system matters so much. A crackdown becomes far more powerful when there is already a place to send people quickly. It turns fear into something concrete. People know that if they get pulled into the wrong encounter at the wrong time, they may not simply be released and sent home. They may disappear into a detention process that is cold, confusing, and extremely hard for families to manage. This is where the trap starts feeling complete. First comes the stop, then the booking, then the transfer, and then the isolation. And once that chain begins, many families feel like the ground has vanished beneath them. Number 9. Federal deportation momentum is making Florida's system feel even more aggressive. Florida's immigration pressure does not exist in isolation. It feels more dangerous because it is moving alongside a bigger national push for tougher enforcement, faster detention, and wider deportation efforts. That is what gives this story its real weight. If Florida were acting alone, some people might still believe the danger could stay limited, slow, or inconsistent. But when state-level pressure starts lining up with stronger federal momentum, the whole system begins to feel heavier. The state becomes the front door, and the federal machine becomes the force waiting behind it. That combination is what turns fear into something much deeper than politics. It makes families feel like there are fewer exits, fewer delays, and fewer chances to recover once the system starts moving against them. What makes this even more intense is the psychological effect. People do not only fear one law, one agency, or one local policy. They begin to feel surrounded by a larger direction of power. News headlines, political speeches, public warnings, and visible enforcement actions all add to that feeling. It creates the sense that the pressure is growing from every side at once. A person may not know every legal detail, but they can feel the environment changing. They hear about cooperation, detention, document checks, employer pressure, and removals becoming easier to push forward. That kind of climate creates constant anxiety because it tells vulnerable people something very clear. This may not be slowing down anytime soon. That is why federal momentum matters matters so much in this story. It gives Florida's crackdown more speed, more confidence, and more force. The danger is no longer just what happens in one county, one traffic stop, or one workplace issue. It is the fact that local pressure can now connect to something much larger and much harder to stop once it begins. This is how the trap grows from a state problem into a life-changing crisis. When local enforcement and federal deportation energy begin moving in the same direction, the threat no longer feels scattered, feels organized, expanding, and frighteningly close. Number 10. Fear itself has become part of the enforcement strategy. One of the darkest parts of Florida's immigration climate is that fear is no longer just a side effect. It has become part of the system itself. That is what makes this issue so powerful. A deportation trap does not only work by arresting people. It works by making people change their behavior before any arrest ever happens. Families begin staying quiet, avoiding attention, skipping services, and living in a constant state of tension. A parent may think twice before driving a child somewhere. A worker may stay home instead of reporting abuse. A victim may avoid calling for help. That is how fear becomes enforcement without needing handcuffs every single time. The system starts controlling people long before it physically touches them. What makes this so dangerous is how invisible it can look from the outside. There may be no headlines, no raid footage, no dramatic scene at all. Yet inside immigrant communities, the pressure can feel overwhelming. People begin avoiding hospitals, public offices, legal systems, schools, and even daily errands because they no longer trust what might happen if their name, documents, or presence receives too much attention. The result is silence, isolation, and exhaustion. Families start living smaller lives, not because they want to, but because fear trains them to reduce risk at every step. And once that happens, the damage spreads beyond immigration alone. It touches health, education, safety, income, and emotional stability all at once. That is why fear may be the most powerful part of the entire trap. A system becomes strongest when people start policing themselves before the government even arrives. That is the hidden force behind this crackdown. It does not only remove people, pressures them, shrinks them, and pushes them deeper into the shadows. In simple terms, this is not just about who gets detained next. It is about who stops living freely right now. And when fear reaches that level, the trap is already working, even before the next arrest is made. In the end, what makes Florida's 2026 deportation trap feel so terrifying is not just one law, one raid, or one agency. It is the way every part of the system seems to connect. A traffic stop can lead to questioning. A small arrest can lead to jail booking. Jail booking can open the door to detention. A job can become a document check. A simple ride can feel like legal risk. And behind all of it is a growing climate of fear that keeps spreading through homes, workplaces, schools, and entire communities. That is why this issue feels bigger than politics, feels personal, feels immediate, and for many families, it feels dangerously close. What makes this story even more powerful is that the people most at risk are not always the ones the public imagines first. It is not only about dramatic headlines or major criminal cases. It is also about workers, parents, drivers, relatives, and mixed-status families trying to live ordinary lives under extraordinary pressure. That is what gives this topic its emotional force. The trap works because it reaches into everyday life. It changes how people drive, where they work, who they trust, when they ask for help, and whether they feel safe enough to simply exist in public. When fear starts controlling daily behavior, the crackdown has already done more than enforce the law. It has reshaped life itself. And that is the real warning behind Florida's 2026 immigration story. The danger is not only who gets targeted next. The danger is how wide the system has become, and how many people may already be standing inside its reach without realizing it. That is why this conversation matters now. Because once fear becomes normal, silence becomes survival, and survival begins to look like invisibility. And when people feel forced to disappear just to stay safe, that is when the true cost of the crackdown becomes impossible to ignore.